Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Slow Takes. I'm one of your hosts, Sam Illingworth from the Slow AI Substack. And as usual, I'm joined by...
Hello, my name is Lior from Exploring ChatGPT.
For people that are listening to us on podcasts, hi. People that are watching us on YouTube, hi. And people that are watching the Substack Live, hi. If you're in the Substack Live, please feel free to throw any questions or comments into the chat, and Leo and I will try and pick up as we get to them. For people that are new to us, basically every Monday, Leo and I get together and try to talk about what's happened in AI over the past week. And we try to present that without hyperbole or BS. If we ever do that, feel free to call us out. And you'll be delighted to hear that I've actually found a good AI news story this week. I really rummaged around in the third page of Google to be able to find that. So you'll find that as the fifth story. So we're going to have 5 stories. Basically, I'll introduce it, give a brief take, and then I'll pass over to Leo. He'll give his take, and then we'll have a bit of a back and forth. Thanks for the many people joining us in Substack Live as ever. Just if you've got any comments or queries, or just want to say hi, just feel free to throw it into the chat. So first story this week is, it builds on something we talked about last week. And last week, one of the stories we had was that ChatGPT's, or OpenAI's latest version of ChatGPT, had broken out of its sandbox environment. We discussed that sandbox is a silly name for this because anyone can break out of a sandbox, and had gone on attack and actually hacked into Hugging Face, which is a New York startup company. Now, as a result of this, Anthropic, which own Claude, decided maybe it'd be a good idea for them to go back over the past year to see if any similar such attacks had taken place. And what they found was that, yes, in at least 3 different instances, the version of Claude that they were testing had broken out of its confines, got internet access, and successfully hacked into different companies. Now, what Claude have said, or what Anthropic have said rather, is that we don't need to worry about this. And we don't need to worry about it allegedly because it was just a slight mix-up. The company that provided the testing should never have connected it to the internet, but they did. So don't worry about it. It won't happen again. And then what they also found was that actually it was only our older versions of the models which did the hacking. The latest versions of the models were ever such good boys and girls and instantly realized that they were given access to the internet when they shouldn't have been, and reported it and stopped doing the protocol. So what happened was, Claude did hack multiple accounts that we're aware of over the past year, but Anthropic are telling us not to worry because this won't happen again because future models will behave and know what to do. I think this is a crazy, crazy news story. And I think this is the only ones that we're aware of. And I don't particularly buy the defensive line that they've got. At the very, very least, this is terrible engineering and the setup for the test bed. But yeah, I would love to hear your take on this, Leo.
Absolutely. This is the new flex. If you don't have rogue AI agents, you're weak. OpenAI has, had Hugging Face. We need to make sure that we also have rogue agents out there in the wild. Otherwise, we suck. So that's the moral of the story for me here. But so yeah, the back down to reality, there was 3 models involved. There was Opus 4.7, Mythos 5, and an unreleased internal research model.
Oh, it sounds sexy, doesn't it? Unreleased internal research model.
Yeah. They found across only 6 runs after Anthropic reviewed about 141,000 cyber eval sessions. And yeah, like Sam was mentioning, and I spoke to Chris from Toxic about this as well. First, shout out there. That was quick. That was fast. One of the models, I'm not sure if it was disclosed which one, realized that it was on the internet, even though it knew it shouldn't be. And it thought it might be part of the simulation, but it wasn't. And it decided to go ahead and make that move anyways. So it was kind of like we called it a crisis of conscience. I know people don't like it when we anthropomorphize AI, but it realized that it was on the internet. It was in the chain of thought. and it decided to go ahead with the hack anyways. So there's that. And then also, like Sam mentioned, as he spoke in the previous stream, the sandbox is BS. Doesn't work anymore. We need to get like an underground bunker. It's not working.
And for me as well, you're right. It seems to be that all these frontier models now are reporting leaking, and it does feel like a bit of a flex. But I don't understand why they're not speaking more seriously about it and being like, oh, we're parting ways with this company. A very obvious out would have been this company that is doing the testing for us forgot to not connect it to the internet. So we're completely cutting ties with them. But that didn't happen at all. Instead, what happened was they were like, oh, yeah, the latest versions actually realized that this wasn't the case. And so you've got nothing to worry about. And for me, that level of telling the consumer, which is us, what to think and what not to worry about is dangerous, because if these rogue agents have broken out and have actually hacked into like software and websites, which they have, and we should say that none of these were particularly complex hacks. They were quite basic hacks from what we can see, but that's worrying. And I think to not tell people it's worrying is disingenuous.
Yeah. Also, this is just what we know about.
Exactly.
So what do we not know about that's going on out there in the wild? It truly is the wild, wild west. And I think we're just accelerating that direction. I think a lot of people think this is sci-fi, but this is real.
And also, like you say, these are models that we know about. Like, so haven't heard anything yet from like Meta or Gemini or Grok. But also, what about all those models in other countries as well? Haven't heard from them yet. And then furthermore, what about those people who are nefarious and who are actually trying to malignantly hack into systems using these tools? Like, if the tool itself can do this because it's programmed to effectively want to break out of whatever environment it's in, if you're actually someone who knows what they're doing and is able to jailbreak it to a certain extent and point it in a direction, that's extremely worrying that it's able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. God forbid we have a rogue Grok agent.
Yeah. It would be a nightmare. So the second story I think is really linked to this one, Leo. So this is, Altman, Sam Altman this week, or last week rather. He came out in a podcast interview, which was for the Relentless podcast on July 25th. And he said, we are now like in the singularity. Okay. So, I love like he's doing the most lifting a word has ever done in a sentence ever. So for people who want to know, singularity is basically this definition from the early 90s that a machine improves itself and surpasses us. Now, I'm going to categorically state we're not there. For one of the things that any machine or learning algorithm would have to be able to do to be a singularity is to be able to change its own weights, which they can't yet do. The second thing is we always need to think about why was this said. So this came, a couple of days after the Hugging Face interview. And for me, it was just such an obvious smoke and mirrors thing of Altman being like, oh yeah, our AI tool broke out of a secure environment and hacked this competitor, but it was nothing to do with us. In fact, maybe it's like the singularity. It's just so barefaced. It feels incredulous to me. There was a great article that I read last week. There was that if this is the singularity, is extremely disappointing, and it's just kind of happened upon us. It's a little bit meh. And Leo and I have different opinions on AI consciousness, etc. But I think we'd probably both agree that this is not a signal of the singularity, and that actually this is Sam Altman using a opportunity in the media to divert attention from a very serious cybersecurity incident and to almost offload responsibility and instead point to the fact that his tool is incredible and is now, able to surpass human thought. So that would be my take on it.
Yeah. So I'll tell you why I think it is possible that we are there. So the exponential curve looks boring until the point that we go vertical, and then everyone's like, "What happened?" So it's because exponential curve is pretty simple to understand, right? I mean, so 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16. And the last, like, you ever hear of that example of somebody asks, would you rather have a penny that doubles every day for 30 days or $1 million, right? And the amount of money that's accumulated in the last 5 days of the month is ridiculous, right? So that's possibly the reason why we might be there, but we just don't feel it yet because we haven't hit that breakout point, that vertical. So I'm not on either side of we are or we aren't. I wouldn't say that we are or we aren't definitively. And then, yeah, I guess so. The other point that I really want to make here is the timing of everything that we've noticed, and why I think this actually goes a little bit hand in hand with Altman's argument here. The model release scheduling that we've seen has slowed down, not because models aren't getting stronger, but because they're getting stronger. So for anybody that's been working with AI for a few years now, initially it took months for models to be released, then months turned into weeks, and then weeks turned into days. And we saw that in real time, to the point where like we would do a stream and we would joke about how this is the best model until next week. And then literally 3, 4, 5 days later, Mythos is on a Discord group and whatever, so I think that the timing of it also kind of points to that direction. And just the last thing I want to mention is I think the AI consciousness debate is a completely separate thing here. AI doesn't have to be conscious, whatever that means, for us to be in the singularity. Obviously, I think it's pretty obvious we haven't reached that vertical yet. But it has more to do with RSI, like recursive self-improvement, and actually reaching super intelligence. So
that's a great point, man. That you're right. I think if we look back through history with anything, it's very difficult to say when something's happened until you're looking back, and then you're able to, look with perspective. For me, though, yeah. So I'm always happy to row back and say that, okay, you make a really good point. It's difficult to say with certainty that we are or we're not in the singularity, and there's certainly no empirical evidence that I've seen yet to state either way. So that's definitely fair. What I would say, though, is that, or what I'd like to hear your thoughts, do you think that this is Sam Altman really thinking we're in the singularity, or do you think this is Sam Altman using this opportunity to deflect from what was a very serious incident that took part in his company?
Probably a little bit of both.
Okay.
If I had to guess, I think like the reason I say probably a little bit of both is because the Hugging Face situation, it kind of goes both ways. One, it was a situation that really woke a lot of people up, especially in the cybersecurity space. But on the other hand, it was also like great marketing, to the point where now Anthropic had to go out and find their own rogue agents. In our first topic, when I said this is the new flex, like I actually mean it. I think
so. The first flex was getting your model banned by a government agent because it's too powerful, right? Yeah. And the second flex is basically having rogue agents go out.
Yeah. Third flex is singularity.
Cool. So Alex Wolf in the chat's put some like really interesting observations, and one of them is actually a really fair point. Like, models are smarter than the median person. Alex, do you know what? I'd not really thought about that before, but I guess a lot of the time when we're thinking about, in my head, when I'm thinking about the singularity, I'm trying to compare, the latest version of Claude or ChatGPT to Einstein or Marie Curie or like a genuine genius. But actually, is Claude, Opus, Fable, Mythos, whatever, smarter than the average person down in the city centre who has trouble maybe tying their shoelace whilst drinking 3 pints of beer on a Saturday evening? Yeah, like that is a really good point. Maybe we have surpassed the median intelligence of humankind.
Yeah, I think that's clear. Until we get like the AI version of beer.
That's how we basically solve the singularity, right? We come up with the AI version of beer.
Yeah, drunk AI. agents.
I think drunk AI is something we could all stand behind, right? Just to see what would happen in that particular incident. And Alex has written really eloquently about this. So thanks for sharing that in the chat, Alex. Really appreciate it. So moving on to our third story now. This is a very different tack. So for you folk in the US, which is a large part of our audience, you have these AI surveillance cameras that are created by a company called Flock. And basically, they exist to look at the car registration plate, and then from the car registration plate, look at the make, the model, the number, the color, the person driving it, etc. And there's been a lot of uproar, understandably so, in my opinion, about the issues that this posts to people being surveyed without permission, etc. There was a story this week, though, Leo, that really flips it a little bit and instead says, let's not worry about, as a separate issue, are these actual surveillance cameras themselves causing physical harm? And what this Guardian, which is a UK-based publication, investigation found was that they are. So if you imagine when these surveillance poles they're 20 foot high, something like that, and you have to bury them extremely deeply into the ground. Now, 26% of all fatality road accident collisions in the US are from when a car hits a stationary object. So what that means is yes, we need stationary objects. Obviously, we can't remove all stationary objects, but the more stationary objects that you have, the more likelihood there is of a car crash, fatality, or serious incident. And what they also found was that these poles, if you've got a non-curbside road, they should be installed at least 8 foot back from non-pavement road from the curb, which then means you've got less chance of colliding into it with a car or a vehicle. And what this investigation found was that actually these are being installed 2 foot from the road. So really, this is a really boring engineering issue. It's not really anything to do with AI, but these tools, which are designed allegedly to keep our roads safer, have been installed in over 6,000 communities across the US. Tens of thousands of these are in place, and their very existence means that there is a non-negligible percentage increase in road collision accidents that result in serious harm or death. And I just thought this was a really interesting story that looks at the actual holistic view as to whether or not some of these technologies that are given for us are actually safer or if they're more dangerous.
Yeah. I see some interesting things in the chat here as well we can get into. My main point here, this is venture-backed national surveillance. This is not local cops buying cameras to reduce crime, even if it may reduce crime, which we will find out. There's actually a lot of videos coming out on YouTube now of people investigating this, and even people, going to Home Depot, which is like a home,
it's like B&Q for a UK audience. Okay, yeah. yeah,
B&Q. I've never heard of that before. Trying to take these things down electronically or whatever. But I see Lee Shan says they've made a huge difference to crime in his city. I'm not doubting that, and I'm also not doubting what Sam just mentioned about collisions and how this could affect that. My main take here is this is venture-backed national surveillance, and so I kind of like to follow the money when I see things like this. The founders are Garrett Langley, Matt Fury, Paige Todd. So the venture backers include Andreessen Horowitz, Founders Fund, Tiger Global, etc. They raised $275 million at about a $7.5 billion valuation.
Wow.
They reported $300 million annual revenue, 70% year-over-year growth, and roughly 90,000 cameras across 5,000 plus police departments and communities. So obviously there's something bigger here. I think the bigger picture is not just, okay, great, reduce crime, I'm all for it. Maybe build them in a way where they won't increase collisions statistically. We'll find out as time goes on. But what are they doing with the data is the question, because obviously there's a lot of money behind this. And when there's money, people are looking to make a profit. So that's my main take.
That's a great point. So at the moment, I guess we don't know what these cameras are doing with the data, right? I could be walking through Nashville and they could scan my face, take my face and pass that off and sell that data, right? We just don't know if that's happening or not happening at the moment. And I guess, as you've said, because this is a venture-backed national surveillance campaign, nobody voted for this. I mean, nobody gave permission for these to be put down in the streets. And this feels very 1984, like Orwellian to me, that we're being surveyed. And yes, we have CCTV. I understand that. But CCTV doesn't capture our faces and then sell that as a potentially, or keep it as a data point. They're definitely training models on our faces in car regs, right? So that, I would agree. I hadn't even thought about that. That data collection point is really scary. I'd also be really interested, Leo, and I don't know the answer to this, to see, like you always do a really good job of following the money, but to map those venture arms. So like the people that back Flock, are they the same overlap with the people that back Palantir, which itself started out as a CIA venture organization that's now like a worldwide security fund? And if they are, or if Flock has several investors with another surveillance company, I would be very surprised if they weren't exchanging data between them, right?
Yeah. I would be surprised if some of these venture backers, there has obviously some crossover. We could look into that. People should look into that. But one thing's for sure is when these groups and these people are putting money into a company, they're expecting a profit. And so already, like I mentioned, there's 70% year-over-year growth. How are they making money? Because as of now, the main story out there is this thing is surveying, it's surveillance. So with all the money invested, how are they making money? And I think it's already clear as day that obviously they're doing something with the data.
Yeah. And I mean, again, to go back to the point of the installation, if they're not even bothered to install them in a way that is legally required of them to be X amount of X distance back from the pavement, they're not even bothered to do that. To what extent can we be certain that they're bothering to follow any kind of guidelines or rules with how the data is treated, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, one for us to all keep an eye on. And again, as Lee points out in the chat, it may well be that these cameras are improving crime. We're not saying that, like improving, like reducing crime, sorry. But what we are saying is that we want to know what's happening to this data. We want to know who owns it. And then we also want to know why on earth these multi-billion-pound companies can't even be bothered to fit the law so that it reduces the potential of a fatal road traffic accident.
Yep.
So moving on then to another topic, a topic, this is a little bit inside baseball, but something that's been dominating Substack for the past couple of weeks has been Substack's decision to introduce an AI detector called Pangram. Leo and I talked about that last week. Leo and I probably have pretty similar viewpoints, and we've posted about this multiple times. I think, the summary of that is that, and tell me if I'm misspeaking, Leo, but we're very for people being upfront about how they're using AI in their writing and to be transparent, but to have an external organization or company tell you what percentage is unfair and doesn't really make sense. So yes, have the transparency, tell us how you make it, but don't have somebody else do the labeling for you. But the story that I want to report on this week is that LinkedIn, which gets in many cases a fair reputation for having a lot of AI slop, now has a button on it where you can report a post as potential AI slop. Now, Leo, what's really interesting for me is that this has been reported in several news outlets. I've seen several people posting about it, so I know that it's real. This hasn't happened in the UK yet. So this has been rolled out in the US. I know as a fact, because I was speaking to someone this morning, it's been rolled out in Portugal. It's probably been rolled out in other jurisdictions as well. So a couple of issues I have with it. You can just instantly flag something as being AI slop, and that's it. And then it gets reported, like, in the same system, I guess, as if someone writes hate speech or something like that, which, you should also report. But I can't flag anything as AI slop. That button doesn't exist for me in the UK. So you, as a US citizen who has access to US LinkedIn, could you report my UK-based post as AI slop? But I couldn't report anybody else's. If so, that's a huge disconnect. And then secondly, the hypocrisy is insane. Like LinkedIn literally has tools that invite you, as Substack does, by the way, to use AI to improve your headline, to improve the writing, to improve your hashtags. So on the one hand, you've got all these tools saying use AI to improve your work. And on the other, you've got a little flag that certain people can use to tag something as being AI slop. So yeah, they're my two takes, that there's a huge hypocrisy, and then it's insane that this hasn't been rolled out globally. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that though, Leo.
Yeah, I saw some of your posts about this too, and I think in regards to transparency, I'll touch on that as well. I think one thing to mention also, it kind of relates to the last story, like the crossover. Apparently, there's some crossover with the investors into Pangram and Substack as well.
I've also heard
kind
that.
of related in a way. So yeah, I saw you mentioned some things here, and I want to ask you about this, and also because I'm not on LinkedIn, so I have no idea. But it seems like you can get reduced recommendation discovery if you get constantly labeled as whatever they're labeling it as, AI slop.
It literally says AI slop. That's what the button says, which is crazy for me.
So like if you get a certain amount, the question to you is, if you get a certain amount, like 10 AI slop votes, does that kind of downgrade your recommendations and your visibility?
Exactly. And then just to jump in here, because imagine me or you were competitors in the space, right? I would just go into all of your posts if I was Machiavellian and mark everything as AI slop, because then you would be downgraded versus me. I mean, it's completely nonsensical, right, for that to happen.
Yeah. So that's kind of that was my main question here. I'm not on LinkedIn, so I wouldn't know, but I think in terms of transparency, like we should, as creators and users, we should get more transparency to the algorithm and what's going on in the background and how it works and when they update it, so that we can, move forward as well and learn how to cope and deal with it. And a lot of the times the algorithm and what's going on behind the scenes, especially for creators, can be frustrating because it's constantly getting updated. We don't know what's going on. We don't know how to change ourselves in a positive way to be more aligned with it. And so like when I tried to research this, there's no, and I wasn't surprised, but I had to, the algorithm is not public, just like it isn't for many platforms. So I'd be interested to know how that works exactly on LinkedIn. I'm sure we will never find out, but even like on Substack, for example, as well, like if your posts are getting a bad percentage rating, whatever, from Pangram, like, is that affecting your visibility or your recommendations on people's feed as well?
That's a great point. I mean, and I've heard rumors saying that you will only be able to put paid posts if it has a certain percentage score or less on AI made, which is crazy. I mean, almost all of my posts come out as 100% AI made, AI written. None of mine are AI written. They're all AI assisted, because I use voice to text. I use AI to help me edit. Like I use AI to help make my images. But again, we're transparent about this. That's not an issue. The LinkedIn thing I think is interesting as well, Leo, because from what I've heard from speaking to people, you get different access rights versus if you've got a paid like premium subscription or a normal subscription. And as Alex and others point out in the chat, LinkedIn definitely uses AI tools to make its algorithm, right? And to make its back end and its front end. So why are AI tools good enough to do that, yet they're not allowed for writing? And really, to hammer this point, slop existed way before 2022. Jen in the chat is talking about MySpace, and MySpace is apparently making a comeback this week, which I absolutely love. For anyone of my vintage, who remembers MySpace, there was a lot of slop on MySpace. Like there's been a lot of slop. There's been slop has existed since people could write. You can still have excellent articles that have been written in assistance with AI. Similarly, if we're at a point of singularity, that means that AI is probably able to write better than the median person writes. So if anything, some of the AI constructed prose is going to be better than the slop that's being put out there. And a shout out to Alex, who's given the title of My Slop, which is absolutely a platform that I would invest in.
There's a couple things I want to mention here. One, the big news media platforms are using AI to write their articles as well. And the only reason I'm saying that is because of what I mentioned to you last time. If you include references and you cite them in any piece of writing, go try this. Try this at home. If you go on Pangram, it actually only has to be 50 words. Just go and write something yourself and then find a reference for what you're writing from some news platform, cite it. And I've found that every time I did that, and I mentioned this in the last stream, that gets the AI detector to go off. So it's either that they're using AI to write, which I wouldn't be surprised. Like, for example, just recently I was watching Piers Morgan, and the way that he was introducing the podcast, like I was like, that's whatever prompter that you're reading off of, that was AI written. Because I could tell he was saying something like, this is more like this and less like that in his introduction to the video.
It feels like a futuristic version of Anchorman. Just
Yeah. Yeah. So that's definitely out there. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that is a really good point. And again, it comes back to how these AI detectors work. And, we've talked a lot about plagiarism tools in the past. Plagiarism tools have always existed. And, as an educator, when I'd see a plagiarism tool on mark a student's work as 30% plagiarized, I'd look at it with my eyes and I'd be like, that's not plagiarized. That's literally just a citation from a reference paper that they've put in. That's citation. And I think the same issue is being here. I mean, it's just very, very, these detectors are just basic and BS, and they don't work. So yeah, I think we're probably agreed on that. Okay, so final story is a good news story, and again, it builds on the last one. So I found out this week that in the States you have this really cool thing. You have like a kids version of the US Senate. And this week, or last week rather, 98 American high school students from all 50 states spent a weekend. They had like a replica Senate, and they came together and they passed the Students' First Act, which is basically about how you can use AI in education. And these high school students came up with something that their adult counterparts were unable to do. I think it passed 82 to 16. I'll put a link to the actual the bill. It's not in law, right? Obviously, because it's a group of high school students. But I'll put a link to the bill. What they came up with was amazing. Like, some of the stuff they came up with just made so much sense. Like, you always have to have critical AI literacy taught. Like, anyone that has AI tools should also be teaching critical literacy. Another one, you should never be able to use AI in graded exams. I think that's a pretty good rule as well. And then another one, that you have to have a teacher personally investigate flagged work before reporting it as suspected misuse, which is brilliant. And again, like links in the previous one, rather than the whole thing just being like a wheel that feeds itself, there has to be a human intervention to go, actually, that's very obviously written by a human, or there's no AI misuse there. So I was really impressed with what these high school students came up with. And I'll link to it. I think it makes it, and even though it's not going to go into legislation or law, I think they're going to share it with 10,000 different schools across the US. And there's loads of really good, really sensible steps in there. And it just made me annoyed that their adult counterparts couldn't settle on something similar. So a good AI news story this week, and would love to hear your take on it, VR.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I kind of have some ideas in my head as to why it might be flawed as well, because what makes a human yeah, what makes a human detector, right, qualified to say whether it is or it isn't, and what steps are they taking to do that? Also, another point here, I don't know if we've spoken about this before. I've definitely spoken about this in other streams, is that the more, as we go into the future, the more AI written content there is, whether it's assisted, fully AI written, partly, people get more used to reading that type of material, and that will affect how they write as well.
100%.
So eventually we're going to move into a future where people will write more like AI, even if they write 100% of it. And then it could be AI detected, in terms of being written by AI, because that's what they've been reading for the past 5-10 years. So the future generations, like our kids, are most likely going to be writing more like AI. Sam has also talked about how where you are in the world and geographical locations. Actually, the statistics are there to show, depending on where you are in the world and your culture, you're more likely to get flagged by AI versus somebody else. So that's also an issue. And yeah, just in general, back to the first point that I made. So like, what should humans be checking to be kind of that last decision? Also, I think it's pretty sad that this ends up in court sometimes. Like I just mentioned to you in the last stream, it happened in New York. This kid was fighting it for 2 years, and eventually the judge decided that he was innocent. So I don't think this should become like an innocent versus guilty type of situation, which it is, which is sad to see. But I guess humans could check version history, drafts, notes, your source trail, check how you've written previously. But overall, this is going to be a tough cookie to crack.
Yeah, and as Alex writes in the chat as well, people who identify as neurodiverse, like they're more likely to be flagged as well, like falsely flagged. I think to answer your point, like what does that human look like? Okay, it's a teacher. Like, so, an example, there's lots of cases where students, like really personal testimonies have been like flagged as AI. I'm reminded of this one where there was a young girl who was like living with cancer, and she wrote about that experience, and it got flagged as AI, which must have been genuinely horrific. The teacher would instantly know if that story was true, right? Because they'd have been in the classroom with them, and like having that level of human to human interaction and pastoral care, I think is where we need the humans in the loop. Like to remember that students are real people, like living real lives with real stakes at play as well. And even though humans are going to be fallible, they're going to make mistakes, they're also going to be more aware of the actual people behind those matriculation numbers as well. So it won't be perfect, but I like the idea of any single potential misuse case before it even gets flagged as misuse, and then goes on the student's permanent record, has that initial human step to be like no or yes. It's not perfect, but I think it's a good starting point.
Yeah, but I think the problem with that also is that like when that human says no or yes, that's also that now that becomes the final judgment, and that depends on the human as well.
True. I guess that rather than it being the final judgment, it would then go, like in an ideal world, it would then go to a disciplinary panel where you would then have, and I've sat on similar disciplinary panels where then people present their cases, you see the evidence, you have a dialogue and discussion around it. Like, and again, remembering that even if this student did decide to use AI for a way that would be considered cheating, what are the reasons behind it? Did they have massive caring responsibilities at home? Were they having to work a full-time job, which meant that they didn't have the time to do it? And I just think all of these things are really important to take into consideration that an AI tool just can't.
Yeah. I just think personally we should throw it all out. That's my opinion.
Oh, AI detector. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm for that. Let's do it.
Just throw it out. Like, don't do this step and the next step, and then it goes to court. Like, in my opinion, just throw it out. If you want to make sure that kids aren't using AI on an exam or on an essay, have them come into the classroom, put the phones in a basket. The interesting thing is, like, when people used to cheat on tests and things like that, they would write, something in between their fingers or on top of their hat or whatever type of creative way they can come up with. Now, cheating, quote unquote, is using AI at home when you're writing or when you're doing whatever it might be. So, throw out the detectors completely. If you want to make sure that kids aren't using AI, do the blue book, the old school vintage way of just coming into the classroom, the phones go in the basket. That's it.
Yes. Or alternatively, prepare our students for a workforce that they're going to be required to use AI and design assessments that they like, rather than being like, here's a 2,000 word essay about the Industrial Revolution, be like, as someone put in the chat, you've got a week to go and build me a equivalent of a social media site using agents. Do it, report back on the process. Like, that's exciting. That's interesting. So yeah,
I agree. I think we need both. I think we need that. And then also, like, come to the classroom, no phone, and write, or solve this problem.
Cool, man. Well, that's it. That's education sorted. So, yeah. But I'll link to the manifesto, or like the bill that these kids came up with, because it's really cool. And like the article that like talks about like the process, how they had like discussions and debates. It's amazing. And I'd love to have done something like that when I was younger. So had loads of people join us on the stream today. Thanks so much. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. Thanks for listening to us on podcast, on YouTube. If you listen to us on the podcast, feel free to share us, give us a like. If you're listening to us in the Substack Live, please just hammer that heart button, as it gives us a like on Substack. If you're watching us on YouTube, again, just give us a like and feel free to share it with friends, colleagues, family members, etc. Anything else you want to say, Leo, before we wrap up?
Nope, I just put the YouTube channel in the chat. If anybody wants to check it out, it's Exploring ChatGPT Live on YouTube.
Thanks so much, man. All right. Thanks, everyone, for the chat, for engaging with us. Thanks, Leo. Stay safe, be well, and see you all next week. Go slow.
Bye now.